Acting's always been the dream. Ever since I was a kid, man, I always wanted to be on TV. I grew up with TV. Uh, I can't say I'm not an only child, but so my entire history is different. I was adopted. Um, my adopted mom had an older son, much older, so he's 18 years older than I am. So we weren't in the house together, and yeah, so TV, I grew up with it. I grew up in the 90s. We didn't have cable either, so it was all like basic rabbit ears. Grew up with a lot of sitcoms and things like that, and I just always wanted to be on TV.
What were some movies and TV shows that were really inspiring to you?
Whew, depending on what age I am, man, I remember just loving like Power Rangers early on, right? Probably pretty typical kid stuff. And then as a kid, I also really enjoyed sitcoms. Like I loved sitcoms. Married with Children, a lot of stuff I probably should not have been watching. And I did get a lot of the humor, but now that I'm older and I go back on Hulu and rewatch a lot of those things, I start seeing the nuances, the stuff that I didn't get, and that's always fun. So grew up with Seinfeld, and a lot of the black sitcoms too, Living Single. I remember Martin, Fresh Prince, all of them, all those family sitcoms, TGIF. So those were always just so much fun.
When did you start acting?
My first official cast was in high school. It was in a musical. Now, I'm not a musical guy. I don't sing, and I have no real experience. But my motives were all ulterior, to say the least, because I went to an all-boy high school and saw that I went to St. John Newman, and 𝐏𝐢𝐜𝐿 was holding a musical, and so I went out there for that. And then also I'm at an all-girl school, so double interest.
Tell me a little bit about when you're preparing to get in the character's head for a role. What does thinking about the character's story mean to you when you're preparing for that role?
This whole thing, I look at it from an objective standpoint. So I like to look at it as a big puzzle, and you got to really put on your detective hat. So the first thing I look at is the overall arc of the story, right? What is the story being told? Then what I like to do is understand what my character is in relation to telling that story. So now I have an objective that keeps me grounded. I've set boundaries. And so I look for all the clues that the writer's giving me, and I start with that. Then once I really set that playing field, I then look to add my creativity, because I as an actor, I think you have to be both a co-writer. And what you write is everything that's not on screen, that's not in that script, everything that leads up to that, how you've developed it, how you've connected to it. And so once you understand what the objective is, what you're trying to get to, then you can then start to create and make choices that's relatable to you and bridge that gap between who you are and who the character is.
Tell me a little bit about how compassion might play into that, understanding who the character is.
Yeah. I think it takes an incredible amount of empathy and compassion, because especially when you are the character and now you have to live behind the eyes of the character, right? In the story, the arc of the story, you might be the bad guy, or whatnot, but you can't see yourself as such. So you can't play that. It's your actions you take. Because really, you could look at any movie, right, any story, and look at the main antagonist, the main villain, and quickly change the perspective, and now they're the hero or the anti-hero. I think Joker did that wonderfully, where they made Bruce Wayne's parents, Thomas Wayne, into the villain. So it was really bad. So um, what you have to do is really find. I think empathy is not feeling a specific feeling; it's connecting. And so you have to find where you connect to the character. And if there is no connection at all, then it's not a character for you. So you have to understand that. What do you understand? What do you understand in a soul to soul relationship? And then I think having that ability to connect also benefits you as an actor overall, because then you open up to your partner, you open up to the world, and you can truly just live, which is probably my favorite part of performing.
Do you think every character is the hero of their own story?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think just like in life, you are you 24/7, and I do. Now, again, as an actor, this is why I think it's also so important to understand where your character falls in, because you are telling a specific story. So, I train at Playhouse West, and my teacher there, Tony Savant, beat into us from day one. The easiest thing to do is to tell the wrong story, to make the wrong choices. And I define wrong by anything that goes against that field, those boundaries of truth that get written out, that you did in your detective mode that you find from the script. So you have to understand what that is. But I do agree. Yeah. Just like in life, we are the main characters of our story. You're the main character of yours. I'm the main character of mine. I'm me 24/7. You're you 24/7. Yeah.
What's it like training actors at Playhouse West?
It's fun. It's a lot of fun. I look at it in the same way. This probably sounds so pretentious. Like a doctor trying to diagnose. Now, I'm not looking for problems specifically. I'm trying to diagnose what's working and what's not, and to give feedback that can be actionable. Even when people send me like scripts or anything like that for feedback on it, my main goal is to be as objective as possible. I try to leave out whether or not I like it, because to me, being subjective, that it's irrelevant whether I like it or not. We have, again, something trying to be told. And so my job is, when I read a script or when I see someone performing a scene, are you telling that story? Are you doing it efficiently? What's working against you, or even what's for you? And I think it's important to understand both, so that you don't accidentally throw away what is working for the sake of trying to fix what is working or what isn't working.
I'm curious as to your thoughts on letting go of control as an actor and surrendering yourself to the script, to the vision of the director.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think overall, no one's above the story, right? And everybody's there to facilitate it. So I think the actor-director relationship, right, should be one that, as an actor, you're, especially when you're performing, when the camera's on or you're, it's showtime on the stage, you're living in the first person, just as you and I are now, right? We're living behind the eyes. I can't see myself. So you shouldn't see yourself in the third person. Where, because of that, it's like you're so close to the picture, you can't see the full picture. That's the director's job, to see things in its totality and to guide you properly. So I think that's the sort of symbiotic relationship between the two. Ego's interesting because you actually do need some sense of ego. That's serving. You have to go into these spaces and own that space. You find a lot with actors, a lot of self-consciousness, a lot of, insecurities with that. A lot of people, if you didn't know any better, you think actors are like this super outgoing and like, oh, you're an actor, you're super extroverted. And that might be true for some, but a lot of them are, really keep to themselves. And again, got a lot of insecurities and self-consciousness. So, but you cannot allow that to take an effect on the stage, even if you are playing someone who is self-conscious and insecure, because you have to own where you are. So there is room for the ego. Now, where the ego starts prioritizing you over the story, that's where you're entering territories where it's working against you.
Do you think that it's good for the psychology of someone to put themselves on that stage to kind of get over that insecurity and put themselves like, is it just good practice for people to do something like stand-up or acting?
It could be, it can be. You do hear a lot of people say, this is my therapy. It can be. Now, is it the way to overcome that? I think it depends on the person. Whether or not you want to be better at presenting yourself on stage or public speaking or, performing, getting over your stage fright, signing up for an acting class. Sometimes you hear that. I think you would have to find the right environment that can support that. Whereas, for example, again, going back to Playhouse West, the mission is to really uphold the craft to the highest standard, right? So if it's not, and it demands a lot of the students. So the process to become a student there, you have to audit, which means you show up, you watch a class, then you have a short interview with Tony, and then, it has to be mutually agreed that this would be a good environment for both. So it's not just, hey, come all, give me your money, you're a student. You have to be accepted. So if your goals don't align with that demand, then a place like Playhouse isn't a good spot for that. But maybe, something like more of a hobby or, something that just people do for fun recreationally, right? Maybe that might help. I do think in challenging your insecurities rather than giving into them, the more you give into them, the more you feed them. Challenge them, and it's hard, and stick with it. And man, I've seen people truly grow. I've seen people grow in so many ways to where they were very sheepishly shy to being just more confident and, again, owning the space that they are. I've seen people diction change. I've seen people speak with more presence. So I've seen people evolve, but that's entirely up to the person and how much they're willing to allow themselves and turn themselves over to the process.
I love it. I love that. How is someone like you or Tony or one of the coaches or directors able to identify during the interview process if an actor is going to be contributing to that excellence of craft?
Sure. I mean, Tony is the one that handles all the interviews. But I think what you find is, again, just understanding what their goals are. What are the goals? And it's funny because Tony will be the first person to tell you not to act, not to do this. If you're if you're trying to do it for the money, there are far better options than acting. If you're in it for fame and notoriety, there's far better ways to go about it. Really, the craft requires everything that you got. It is service, when it comes to acting. When you do, again, going back to like storytelling, nothing is above the story. No star. And at least that's how I think it should be, even though it's not always practiced. But no one is above the story. You're all there to serve. And it requires you to understand you're just part of the ecosystem. And with a film especially, film is just such a collaboration of so many disciplines. It takes so much talent and so much. I've been on both sides of the camera, in front, behind, and the amount of work that it takes behind, physical, mental, it's insane. And so you have to understand, that everybody is sacrificing in some sort of way. And if you're the performer, the amount of gratitude one should have that people are working hard and making you look as best as possible. Even you setting this up, like I'm just sitting here like, this is for me. I'm sitting here with a lot of gratitude that you're helping me look the best I can look. That's awesome.
I love it. Every role on set, no one's no one's above anyone else. The hair and makeup department is not above the grip team, and the actors aren't above the hair and makeup department.
Absolutely.
Everyone's in service to the story.
Absolutely. And you get, and look, sometimes you get friction because everybody's passionate about what they're doing. Everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody wants to service the story as best as possible. And sometimes that does create conflict. I see that, a lot more than the prima donnas. But at the end of the day, when you see that final product and it came out great, you take pride that you played a part in that, and there's, God, you look at a film and you're a filmmaker, how many unsung heroes there are to, the credit always either goes to the lead actor or the director. And there's just so many hands that goes into shaping what this thing is. It's crazy.
That's beautiful, but it requires a lot of humility to have that perspective to say, we are all here. We are cogs in a very complex clock.
Yeah.
We're bringing this vision to life. The director doesn't make the movie. The director just points everyone in the right direction.
Right. And assembles, I think, the best team possible to make this project work. So, it's almost like a coordination that, the director had between creativity and logistics.
One of my favorite acting performances is Empire Strikes Back. It's one of my favorite movies, and Mark Hamill's acting in it. In particular, you have this trash can on wheels that beeps and boops, and it runs around, and it has so much personality, right? Or you have this little Kermit the Frog who's sitting on a rock, and he's like, telling us about the Force. In any other world, both of these characters, Yoda and R2, would just be so ridiculous.
Right.
But Mark Hamill believes that Yoda is real. Like, you can tell, like, his Luke Skywalker treats Yoda like he's a real person.
Yeah.
And that's why we are able to map that onto Mark and also believe that Yoda's a real person, even though it's this ridiculous puppet.
Oh, absolutely. I think the best films, no matter what, whether we're talking a puppet or an animal or some type of other existence being, has to be personified. We have to recognize them with some kind of human trait. It's why something like the original Lion King, the animated Lion King, why that worked. Well, they're both animated, but why that works so well, right? Why it's one of the saddest scenes in cinema history when, spoiler alert, Mufasa dies. Because there's such a personification there. And because, what I like to think of is almost like the audience being like a baby bird, right? And the first thing a baby bird sees is thinks they're the mom, right? And so the first person we attach to in a film is, our protagonist. And I like to define protagonist by who we ground the reality around in this story, who we base the relationships off of, and the perspective we see the story through. And so, for us, when again, using the Lion King as an example, right? When Simba loses, it's that grief that Simba goes through at a young age, losing that father. We can see ourselves through that. They do such a great job at allowing us to sort of project ourselves onto that character. And then we are now experiencing everything the protagonist is experiencing, which is my favorite way of watching a film. So going back to Star Wars, not just the fact that Mark Hamill does such an amazing job at being able to create the reality of this absurd world, but also being able to portray a relationship. Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker doesn't have parents. So you could say he's always been a journey on a father figure. I mean, it's not right there, but emotionally, he's looking for a father figure. And, he had Obi-Wan, his Uncle Ben, Yoda. And no matter what, all these people have that father figure influence, but they're not his father, So that plays such an important role. So you see that relationship and why when Yoda does perish, it's sad. When Obi-Wan gets struck down, it's sad. When Uncle Ben and God, what's his wife? I forget the wife's name.
Aunt Beru.
Aunt Beru, because I almost want to say Aunt May, but that almost comes right out. But Aunt Beru, it's sad when he comes back and they're perished. This is a guy who's constantly going on a theme of, not having his parents around. So being able to take that puppet and not only treat it as if it was real, but it's another father figure.
I love that. It's there's so many orphan stories out there. I mean, every character and their mother has, loss like that. And a lot of writer directors, they create loss in a character, and you think, okay, that's enough to make the character, the audience feel something. But the audience doesn't really get behind pain as much as they do desire and the I want. And what you're pointing to is Luke wants a family so badly, and Darth Vader wants a son too. And that's what makes Empire so interesting, is that it's like Hamlet in space. It's like, it's this father just on this ruthless path to reconnect with his son, and then his son trying to be the hero, but also having that calling to not just the dark side, but to be reunited with his family. Great parallel you connect there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and I agree. Every film serves off. There's a want. There's a strong desire that leads off into this tale, right? And you look at a film and there's a reason why these events are unraveling now. What has led up to, whatever this desire is, why is it not pushed off? It has to be extremely strong with it. And so you can't just leave it at a loss. There's no story there. If you leave it at that, that's where a lot of your really bad films come in, or bad stories come in, because now it's just, it's just a sad story. That's all it is. But there's really no substance there. No matter what the circumstances are, we like to see people trying to get something, trying to accomplish something. And it's more than just, a pedestrian accomplishment. It's the deepest desire that this character wants, this character cares. So when we're in that audience, we live vicariously through the protagonist. And again, I think a really well told story allows us to do that.
Tell me the difference between theater acting and screen acting.
You get a lot of opportunities to cheat in screen for film as an actor. Both are very different and very rewarding experiences. In my younger days, I've always preferred film acting to theater. As I grow more mature, I really love theater. I really love performing live and having that energy that's there. So there's technical differences. Stage acting does require bigger. I like to say that with a grain of salt, because you shouldn't manufacture bigger, but make choices that allow room to be bigger. The audience in the back needs to see. Again, it's how you respond to things that tells a story. Also, because due to limited constraints on stage, most of the story is typically told through behavior and dialogue. Whereas film is a visual medium, not just visual. You can tell a story, through audio, through sound design, tells a story. Character could be, it's a horror film and you don't see the monster, but you hear footsteps. Tells a story, and I love watching people do Foley sound, man, because it's incredible, the creativity that goes behind not only trying to capture the right sound, but you got to be so intentional on what you're going after, because it might not just be a footstep. Maybe it's a hard thud. Maybe it's a light tap. All those different choices tell a different story. So you have as an actor, you can be so much simpler, right? Because you have so many other elements that assist you in telling the story. You have cinematography, you have art design, sound, or art direction. You have how the set is designed. You have hair and makeup. You have wardrobe, which you have that on stage as well. But you have editing. You have music. You have composition. You have so much that assists you in telling the story, where sometimes all you have to do is just be there. You don't really have to do anything. Robert De Niro talks about that. All the great actors talk about that. You just exist. You don't have to do anything. I always forget what the name of it is, but sort of like explaining editing. It's a Russian technique thing, and they show a man. It's three scenarios. They show the same man, and it's a guy, and then they show a bowl of soup. Then it goes back to the same guy. You know what I'm talking about. And it goes to a little girl in a casket, and it goes back to the same guy. Nothing's changed between all three of them, and it shows a beautiful woman. And the expression is the same, but we put perspective on what that guy is thinking and feeling based off of what we saw afterwards. So with the soup, he's hungry. With the little child in the casket, he's mourning. With the beautiful woman, he's lusting. So, but nothing in each presentation has changed, just what has come after at that. So I bring that example up to just say, in screen acting, it is completely, you have so much assistance, you really don't have to do anything, and of course you do have to do something when it's time to do something, but a lot of times you just have to exist.
Context is everything. I think that editing is what makes film its own medium, like the power to just take two different performances and contextually throw a different shot in there. It just completely changes the tone of the scene.
It's so interesting. You could take the same script and the same footage, give it to two different editors, and have two completely different movies. And that's what's fun. I mean, I've edited people's films, and they say a film is written 3 times. There's the actual screenplay, then it's when you actually produce it, and then when you edit it. And as an editor, I have rewritten people's films, and it has been for the better. Because I would see things that they didn't see. I'm like, oh, here's a good opportunity, boom, and then we can sort of rewrite it and readjust things, and that brings out these moments or this character. But the earlier you can do that stuff and down the pipeline, the better the story is going to be. So, but I agree, with the editing is everything, and you can give a solid performance, and that's the thing, the whole idea of making a film, it's fickle, because it's never one exact thing. That you need that, it's a stew, right? When you have a stew, you don't taste one ingredient, you taste the collective. And so you could give the performance of a lifetime, and then it's edited like crap, and it doesn't make you look good, or vice versa. You can shoot it all well, edit it well, and the performance is not bad, but usually the latter is received better than the former. And
you have to approach each of those 3 steps like it's its own movie. Mm-hmm. It's its own entity. You can't get hung up about production, everyone was sick that day, so we can't edit it this way. So it's like you have to isolate each step of the production.
Absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about how being behind the camera has been able to make you a better actor in front of the camera.
Oh man, I recommend that every actor should get experience behind the camera, really learn it, because you're able to, it helps influences your choices. Especially, film is such a technical art where things have to be very contained. Like on stage, you got a lot more freedom, right? In film, you're restricted to the frame. So understanding that even, hey, the camera has an 85 on, or, 135 or whatever, I should probably be as relaxed as possible. Every little thing I do is going to be that much more magnified. Understanding where you are in frame helps influences your choices. I think, and using things to your advantage. I think the more people who are the masters of what they do, very little is by accident. They know how to make things work for them, whether we're talking athletes, fighters or artists. How to use things. And then the more that you know and you are aware of, again, finding those opportunities that maybe other people don't see as opportunities. So I think absolutely, not only should they learn the technical side of it, but everything that goes into the creative choices of what makes this thing be. And I think it also, that humility side of it too, how much work goes into it. How, it's not just your performance. In fact, it's so many things helping you, but then you tend to get all the credit, and there is a humility that goes behind that.
Tell me how important bringing a good energy and a vibe to the set is, being good to work with.
When I have made my own films, energy on set is the thing I protect the most. I think you get the best out of people when everybody is comfortable, relaxed. I want people to care. You can't buy that. You can buy people's abilities. You can pay them to show up and do a good job. You can never pay for someone to care. And that's what I want to pay for. So good energy is something that I value extremely high. Even to the point where when I do have a set, I will go the extra mile and not skip on crafty and lunch. I think because that's the thing. I want people to feel appreciated. And then when I have anytime I'm in a project, yes, we're doing the best for this project, but I'm not just thinking about this project. I'm thinking about the next one. And in that mindset, you keep yourself working, you keep yourself busy. So I want people to come back. I want people to remember this as a good time. There was good food. I felt valued. So energy it brings that extra zhuzh, if you will, to this project where what might make a good project a great project.
Tell me what integrity means to you.
Integrity means that despite the easy way out, that you will do something despite how difficult it is. That you uphold your values, that you bring the best of yourself. I mean, in different contexts, it looks different, but you stay true to yourself and you do right by others. And it's being able to look at yourself honestly and say, I did what I could. That's what I think integrity is.
What's the hardest experience acting you've ever had?
It's a funny question because, it's all a challenge. And, anytime I get to act, for me, it's a privilege. I think the hardest is when, again, the vibes on set is messed with. Put me in any situation. I don't mind. Put me in hot weather. I'm sweating. Put me in, because I love this thing so much. I'll freeze. I'll do whatever. But the hardest is when you're not around good energy or there's so many outside influences at play. So I was on a set where there was just a huge disagreement between the lead actor, who was also the writer, and the production company, and that was I had a smaller supportive role in it, but that was just a tough time on set because the energy was just destroyed off camera, which also bleeds on camera, And again, doesn't mean that the performances are bad, but I always look at it as something that's good could have been great or could have been even higher. And then there's just the challenges of I did another project. I've been a one-man band as a filmmaker, so I've done projects where I had to jump back and forth, and just the difficulty of doing that and not having the hands, it's very challenging. We shot a scene in a desert and we're blind and deaf. We got nobody on sound. We got nobody behind the camera. We're doing, we set up the frame. We're jumping in back and forth, constantly trying to look at the frame as the best we can, and then hit record and nobody's behind the camera. No one's listening in. So those are challenges. But yeah, but even in that, I would take that over 1,000 times over. Then again, there's personal tension and everything off, drama off camera.
How do you reconcile what we were talking about earlier, that integrity of doing the best job you possibly can, pushing things over the finish line, when, man, the first AD is just pushing your buttons and like the energy is so off and everyone is not getting along. How do you reconcile pushing that extra mile and doing the best job you possibly can when the energy is the resentment has crept in?
Who am I? Am I the lead actor or am I the director?
Whatever role, whatever capacity you're on the set, how do you reconcile that?
Yeah. So I think internally you have to understand where you lie in the total pole because filmmaking is very like hierarchical or the hierarchy in
It
film.
should be, yeah.
Yeah. So you have that totem pole, and depending on where you are, you really do have to know your place because you can make things a lot worse before you make them better. And I think, so will your actions add fuel to the fire or could your actions suppress the fire? So I think you have to know what role you play within that production team. I think as a director, right, you are sort of, or you should be, you are the energy everyone else is going to feed off of. So, for instance, when I'm a director and I'm doing a story and I'm like, let's say I'm afraid that we're not going to get something or, we're running behind schedule, we're not going to be able, even though I might be feeling this internally, I refuse to let that show. Because again, protecting the energy of the set is the second that I start panicking, everyone else is going to lead towards that. So, or I'm frustrated or whatnot. Now, if I'm the director and the first AD is, like you said, pushing buttons, there's resentment. I would try to nip these things in the bud. Let's address it. But the way I do it is in a way that I don't want to put people on their back foot. I don't want to put them defensively because I want to hear the message. So is there something wrong? Can we talk about it? And hopefully we put out a fire before it really starts. If I am a guest star on something, I'm a guest on this set, you just have to grin and bear it because, again, I could fan the flames and not only make the situation right then and there worse, I could potentially burn my connections to these people too. So you really do just have to understand what's your place in this and try to handle things as diplomatically as possible.
I think a big difference between theater acting or stand-up and film is a lot of people view them as like there's a live performance, so there's that experience there, whereas film is a different experience. And I view film also, it's the capturing of an experience. It's a 2-hour capture of a bunch of people making a movie. That's what a movie is. So yeah, you could AI in, a 1930s car in the background, or you could go rent one for $500 for the day and have it on the set. And having that older sports car is going to create a different experience that, like you said earlier, is going to bleed into the performances, into the way that people act and stuff. So tell me a little bit about the difference between the experience of making a movie and making a scene in a play.
Yeah. Again, both of them very different. So when you're acting in a scene in a movie, the one thing that can be fun and challenging is things being out of sequence, right? And, you might, depending on the level of production, right? If you're only doing everything single cam, or if you might have 2 cameras that's shooting 2 different compositions. But the fact that okay, we want this little section in a tight shot and then you have to jump towards it. And everything kind of, it's almost inorganic, but it's still fun. And the possibilities, what you're able to do when you watch that playback, you create this world and this reality, right? And that's so much fun to see visually. Whereas on stage, it's extremely organic because you're watching things play out in real time. You're feeding off the energy of your castmates, but the audience plays their part too. Even though, for the most part, a lot of scenes don't break the fourth wall or include the audience, but even then, audience energy can affect the show. It may not destroy a show. If you're a professional, it won't destroy a show, but it can certainly enhance a show, especially if it's a comedy. So, look, you're an actor and you're in a scene and a big revelation comes and you hear a gasp. You hear people connected. You feel people connected. That affects, the performance. It's a small effect. It's not going to make or break it, but it plays its part. So that's the beautiful thing when it's live, and even stand up, man, when you get people responding or reacting. So stand up is a direct, even though let's say I'm doing my material and it's just me and it might sound like a monologue, it's a dialogue. It is a dialogue. I'm having a dialogue with you, even though I'm the only one talking. It's a conversation. So I'm not just up there, in the spotlight, just reciting words that I put together. I'm building a connection to you and telling a story. And then every now and then, maybe there's just a quick exchange, right? The crowd work that we see and stuff like that. But all of it's still scripted for the most part.
Who plays the role of the audience on a film set?
The camera and the crew. Sometimes, they're there with you. They're watching you. Let's say you're doing a scene and there's something that happens. You can feel the crew being into it, especially let's say, something happens unexpectedly. You make use of it and it just happens to be hilarious. And you can hear people doing their best not to ruin the take, You feed off of that energy. So the crew, the camera, all of that sort of plays into that energy. And then, your co-star, who might be off camera.
Tell me what it's like being a dad and raising a family as an actor.
You get some of the best stories. It's the greatest role I ever had to play, being a dad. It's my favorite role. It's a lot of fun. One of my favorite films I ever did was called How to Satisfy a Woman, which is a family Christmas movie. And I named it after a book. And my kids are 5 years apart. And my daughter she was 1. And I was like, and I'm like, she's not going to be this small, this age for long. And I just fell in love with this idea of this baby is the main antagonist of the film. And I like fell in love with this idea of, it was originally an idea of a couple who were babysitting someone else's kid. And the kid's kind of like breaking them apart. And they come together by their mutual hatred for this baby. That was hilarious to me. But I couldn't find a way to make it a decent script. So, but eventually it came to parents who they lose their daughter's like soothing toy. And she is having a fit and it's driving them apart. But my point of attack with the story is they are already kind of having some marital issues. They haven't been intimate in quite some time, and by the end that gets resolved. And it's to the point where I had opened the movie with I played a lead character in it, or the lead male character. The movie opens with me reading the book How to Satisfy a Woman. And I think it kind of plays in cleverly. I remember trying to decide, what do I call this? Mm-hmm. And then How to Satisfy a Woman. So that's one of my favorite roles. So anytime I get to incorporate my kids in what I love to do is always like a dream come true. One of my last short films that I shot a few years back, that I helped produce, my son got to play a small role in it. And me and my son are on set together. That was one of my favorite experiences, and we didn't really get to interact our characters, but we got to be on set together at the highest of the entire production's availability. It was definitely a skeleton crew. We were shooting at this bar and grill in Westchester called Righteous Tap House. Mm-hmm. Great spot, great food. And so we were very lucky enough to get that location. And had a few people out, and they did a phenomenal job with filming. We had a tall task that day, shooting a bunch of like scenes, and the film's called Bounty. It's actually going to play at the Philly Independent Film Festival.
Very good.
But just being there and like direct my son, and he was doing things I didn't tell him to do, and him taking that reality, like being able to watch these little choices, I was just like taken aback. So anytime I get to include the family in what I do, that's just like perfection.
What's next for you?
Next is I'm diving headfirst into stand-up comedy. So I'm really trying to build that. And I think what I love about stand-up is how minimalistic it is. So I just need me and my material and a mic, and it virtually can be done anywhere at a comedy club, restaurant, anywhere. And I love that aspect, and it just feels like you can keep yourself more active. You have a bit more control over your fate in this, like we were just talking about. There are gates, right, that you're trying to break through. Whereas when you're an actor, even for stage, you need the participation and cooperation of others. Even if you say do a one-man show, you still need someone in a booth manning the lighting cues. You need someone that's going to usher in people to their seats and take tickets. And obviously with a film, you need a crew. You can do what we did in the desert, but you're not going to get the most mileage out of what you're trying to do. You're going to be extremely limited. So you definitely need the cooperation of others to try to get there, and the participation of others, which is a great thing. Community is a great thing. But with stand-up, it's just me, and I could have that. And so I have aspirations of, trying to write out a one-man show based off my life's experiences. Been through a lot. But the thing that I had the most trouble finding is I like we talked about earlier, I can't do a woe is me type of story where, oh, here's my story. A bunch of bad things happened to me. That's it. No, I want you to take something away from this. Even though I've been through this obstacle, that obstacle, it's not just things happening to me. It's how I responded to it and where I am now. There was one point in my life I was homeless, and now I'm on my second home, So I don't just want sad scenes for the sake of sad scenes. I would need it to play over the course of a story arc. So that's what I'm also working on now. And recently I just had an epiphany that I found to be a big missing piece to telling that story. So I'm still in the works of that, but that's like one of my major goals is to write this one-man show.
Where can we find you?
You can find me. The brand is Nice Guy Rob. But you got to put a little one where the I should be, because someone else already had Nice Guy Rob. So I'm keeping that consistent across the board. I'm mostly active on Instagram and TikTok, and the production company is Bright Life Productions, which is named after my kids. My son is named Robert as well, which means bright flame, and my daughter is 𝐏𝐢𝐜, which I didn't know at the time. We just liked the sound of it. But I didn't know at the time that both Zoe and Ava, which is her first name, both names are her first name, both mean life. So she's life. So it's Bright Life Productions, named it after my kids. So on Instagram, you can find it _Productions, I believe. That I don't know. But the logo is a black logo of a silhouetted man giving a child a balloon.
Rob, thank you so much for coming.
Dude, thank you, man. This is phenomenal. Your space is phenomenal, and I love what you're doing.